Hello, welcome to Esperanto 101. I'll be teaching this course. This is the first lesson, grammar. Now, before I start, I'm going to direct all of you to the subreddit where we have the class location for this class. Along the sidebar of that, you should find that there is a link titled Esperanto in 3 pages. All of what I will be going over today, as well as several of the future lessons, should be listed on that document. So if you want just something to visually follow along with, or if you just need a reminder later, that should be a really handy document to help out with that sort of thing. Now, the first place I'll start is the alphabet, because while Esperanto uses mostly the same letter shapes as the English alphabet does, it works a little bit different, and we have a few new letters added in, a few taken out, you know. So, the first thing I'll explain is, in Esperanto, every letter is paired with exactly one sound. This is the letter A. It says A, as in father. It always says A, as in father. Vowels are named by just the sound they make. This is the letter B. It says B. Consonants are named by the sound they make, followed by the O sound, just for consistency. So, the letter B says B, as in boy, much like it does in English. This is the letter Z. It makes a TS sound, like in hats. So, it is a little bit trickier to remember just because we don't have a TS as a single letter in English, but it actually works really well. You'll just have to trust me until you see for yourself it works. This is the letter Ch. You will notice it looks exactly like a C with a hat. That hat is called a chapello, which is cleverly the Esperanto word for hat. This is Ch. Again, it says ch, as in chat, chart, chew, choose. And it makes basically the sound that the letters CH do in English. If you do not have an Esperanto keyboard with which to type lovely letters like these, you will be able to find one. If you use Windows, you can use Typey, which again, there ought to be a link for that in the sidebar of our lovely subreddit home. If you do not use Windows, then I would firmly encourage you to Google it. There are methods of typing these letters, of representing these letters without actually having the letter itself, but it's so much easier for understanding each other if you have the actual keyboard set up. If you use Linux, I happen to know that iBus has some lovely Esperanto keyboard layouts. I am not 100% sure about Mac, but Google almost certainly is. And if you are just absolutely unable to find anything that would allow you to type letters like these, then there are other systems that can be used. When I'm texting on my old phone that barely even has a keyboard at all, I use the X system, in which you type the letter that you would be using, followed by X, which represents the hat, I guess. So this would be represented as CX. And there is also the H system, where it would be CH, and there are a few others, but again, I would strongly encourage the actual letters if it's at all possible, simply because it definitely speeds up learning, and it's a lot better to get used to seeing the letters properly written. Next is the letter do. Do, as in dog. It's the same as it is in English. Same sound. E, as in elephant. Fo, as in forget or far out. Go, as in go. This is one of those letters that English speakers might get a little tricky about, because in English, this letter makes two sounds. In Esperanto, it again always makes one. Go. This one is the letter that says jo, as in joy, and it is in fact the first letter of the Esperanto word joyo. I'll bet you can guess what that means. This is the letter ho. Ho. Just like English. This is ho. It's that phlegmy sound, like at the end of loch. It doesn't actually, that sound doesn't show up in English terribly often, but luckily this letter doesn't show up terribly often in Esperanto either, so it won't give you a whole lot of trouble. Still, very important to know the alphabet. Ho. This is the letter E. It says E. You may have noticed by this point, if you are familiar with, for example, Spanish, that the vowels make basically the same sounds they do in Spanish. So, just like in Spanish, E. This is yo. It's basically just like the English letter Y. It will be pronounced exactly the same as that for all practical purposes. If you put a hat on it, it is jo, which is kind of like the S in pleasure or treasure in English. Jo, jo. Ko makes the same sound it does in English, as do lo, mo, and no. O makes a special sort of sound that is halfway between the aw in awful and the O in over there. So if you kind of try and meet those two halfway, you come up with O. And it's the sound you've been hearing right after all of these lovely consonants. Then we have po, which is another familiar sound. Ro, because in Esperanto, we are supposed to roll our R's. If you have trouble rolling your R's, as I know some English speakers do, the best way I've heard for rolling your R's, if you have trouble with that, is to think of the English name Betty. That double T sound in Betty, d, 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 r, r, r. It can be made to sound like rolling your R's enough that almost no one will notice. So, and if it's that much trouble, you don't technically have to, but you'll have a really strong accent if you don't. So, definitely better to roll your R's. So, r, r, ro. And if you can't do that, then think of Betty. Then so, which should be familiar, and sho, as in shoe or shush. So put a hat on so, and it becomes sho. Then we have to, which is again familiar. Oo, as in ooh, look at that. Wo, which, note here that the hat on the U is upside down. That is an important thing to remember, but mostly just for when you're handwriting. It doesn't necessarily mean anything, but it's important to remember so you don't write it down wrong. Wo serves basically the same purpose as the English W. If you find yourself getting confused between U and wo, wo is a consonant, and it exists mainly to form diphthongs. In Esperanto, if you have two vowels in a row, those vowels each get their own syllable. Every vowel gets its own syllable, always. And if you want to make a diphthong, which is like where you're taking two vowels and smushing them together to make one new sound, like ow instead of ah-oo, that is where you need wo. Then, after that, we have vo and zo, which are both fairly predictable, make the sort of sound that English speakers would expect from them, which is nice of them. Another important note about pronunciation in Esperanto: the emphasis will always be on the second to last syllable of every word. So, if you're not totally sure where to put the emphasis, second to last syllable, always. You will notice that there are a lot of always rules in Esperanto. There are much fewer always except this rules, like English has so many of. So, that definitely, for sure, makes it easier. Now, after that, let's go on to our pronouns. Pronouns fall into three categories generally. You have first person, I, me, my, we, us, our. You have second person, you and yours. And we have third person, he, she, it, they, them. That represents the first person is I am the first person that has been involved in this conversation. If I'm telling this story, it has not had to go through anyone else. I am the first and only person involved. I can speak in first person by myself. But if I'm talking to you, there has to be a second person involved in the conversation. If you and I are talking about him, then there has to be a third person involved in the conversation, even if he's not actually there. You understand? Those of you who have studied other languages in the past will be familiar with other different types of pronouns. You've got subject pronouns and object pronouns and possessive pronouns and sometimes reflexive pronouns. And in Esperanto, pronouns are pronouns. And you don't have to have subject pronouns for if you're doing the action and object pronouns for if you're receiving the action. Like, I catch the ball if the ball is thrown to me. That sort of thing. And Esperanto has other ways of dealing with that we'll get to later. So, pronouns, first person singular is me. That should be a really obvious thing if you hear it or read it. It's me. It's I, technically. Then, if there is you and I are ni. We, us. Ni. You are vi. He is li. Li. She is one of those that when you hear it is incredibly obvious, but when you see it, not so much if you're not used to the alphabet. So remember, sh, e. She is she. G is it. G. Ili is them, they. It's a third person plural. And just like in English, Esperanto does not differentiate in third person plural between a group of males and a group of females. That seemed unnecessary, so they cut it out to make the language a bit easier. Now, here we have two more pronouns that are a little bit trickier. First, we have si, which is a reflexive pronoun for the third person. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with reflexive pronouns, basically, si means himself or herself or itself or themselves. If he brushes his teeth, the second his in there, that is obviously referring to the same person as the first he was, is going to be si instead. Just to clear up a few things, because that way you can actually differentiate between if he is brushing his own teeth or if he is brushing some other male's teeth. I don't know, it could happen. And in Esperanto, you can tell the difference. Then we have oni, which is hands down my favorite pronoun, just because I feel like sometimes we really need it in English. Oni is the pronoun for a hypothetical third person. If you've ever heard someone say, "one would think," or if you've heard people talking about some sort of hypothetical person or group of persons, then that is going to generally be translated as oni, so that you don't have to keep saying they instead of he or she, or someone, one, because that gets really tedious after a while. So now you can say oni. And because oni is a third person pronoun, it can also take the reflexive pronoun si. You will use this only with the third person pronouns though. So if I do something to myself, then me does something to mean, which we'll get to that again a little bit later. But I do something to myself, I use me both times. If you do something to yourself, you use vi both times. If we do something to ourselves, then we use ni both times. But in any other case, you'll use si for the second person. The second time, rather. The himself, herself, themselves, itself. Those words will all be translated with si. So, that is the pronouns. Done. Now, nouns. One of my friends described Esperanto as being kind of like Legos. If you want to make a new word, you can kind of put the little blocks together, and all of a sudden, poof, new word. And while people might look at you funny for some of the new words that I'm sure you can create, everyone will understand what that word technically means. And one of the fun things there is that you can actually see the part of speech just by looking at it. Because all of the nouns end in O. Every word in Esperanto that ends in the letter O is a noun. O is how nouns end. You don't have male and female words like you do in some languages, where door might be female and chair might be male and no one's really sure why, but it totally fits to the native speakers. In Esperanto, nouns end in O. If you are unfamiliar with parts of speech in English, a noun is a person, place, or thing. I am a noun, you are a noun. My computer is a noun. That wall over there is a noun. My home is a noun. Person, place, or thing. Adjectives end in A. Adjectives will always end in A. That's the adjective ending. If you see a word that ends in O and you want to turn it into an adjective, you take off the O and put an A there instead. And poof! That noun is now an adjective. You can turn house into an adjective. It'll look funny. I couldn't for the life of me tell you how you would translate that into English. House-ish. But it's an adjective now because it's got an A at the end. Hooray! Some of you will already know that in certain languages, nouns and adjectives have to be in a particular order. In English, it is always the noun first and then the adjective describing it. Sorry, reverse. It's always the adjective in English and then the noun describing it. It's describing. So it is a red car. In Spanish, it's the other way. In Spanish, it is a car red if you wanted to just translate it directly. Don't translate it directly, that's weird. But in Esperanto, because Esperanto was made to be a universal second language, an international second language, you can do it whichever way you're comfortable. You can do the noun and then the adjective. You can do the noun and then the verb and then the adjective that was describing the first noun if you feel like it. And that's okay. People will still know what you mean regardless. It's great. It's so handy because then you don't have to worry about this weird word order thing. You know. If you want to make a word plural, you add yo to the end of it. So, another important thing to know is, if you make a noun plural, then you also have to make any adjectives describing that noun plural. So, if you are talking about your brother, and then you wanted to add one more brother into the conversation, and talk about your brothers, fratoi, then you would also have to add that plural to the end of any adjectives describing your brothers. Because that way people can be absolutely sure with this flexible word order that they really do understand that you're talking about your brothers with that adjective. You make sure the endings match so that people know that the words go together. So again, that is yo to make any word plural. And is the adverb ending. Adverbs end with e. Adverbs are words that describe verbs, just like adjectives describe nouns. In English, adverbs tend to end with ly, like quickly. If you are talking about someone moving quickly, then they move rapid e. If you are saying that person is fast, they are rapid a. If you are talking about their speed, you're talking about their rapid o. So, just like that, you've got one word that can turn into 3 different parts of speech, and it's still really obvious that it's the same word. Now, here's where we get to one of the trickier things in Esperanto for English speakers, and that is the accusative case. To make a word accusative, you add the letter N. Accusative case, for those of you who didn't take Latin classes in high school, which is most of us, accusative case is for direct objects. A direct object, for those of us who didn't pay much attention in English classes in high school, sorry teachers, and a direct object is the object or person or whatever receiving the verb. So if I throw the ball, then I am doing the action. I am the subject. The ball is receiving the throw. The ball is the object of the throw. That's the direct object. Direct objects will always have the letter N at the end of it. And if your direct object has the letter N at the end of it, then the adjectives describing it also have to have an N at the end of it. And if the direct object is plural, then the adjectives describing it also have to be plural and have an N at the end of them. Because once again, we have to make them match. Because that's how we're allowed to have this really flexible word order. That means that you don't just have to say, I throw the ball. You can say, the ball throw I. Throw the ball I. And it makes exactly as much sense regardless how you say it. Because that little accusative N lets us know that the ball is the thing being thrown, and if I don't have that accusative N at the end of it, then I'm not the one being thrown. If it's just me, then me is the one doing the action. If you tried to throw me, then you would try to throw mean. If you tried to throw my ball, then you would be trying to throw me young. Because you add that adjective ending A to the end of me to make it possessive. That's because the word my is describing the word ball. So technically, it's an adjective right then. It's working like an adjective, so we give it the adjective ending. And that's how you do possessive pronouns in Esperanto. And that's how you do object pronouns in Esperanto. You just follow the same exact rules as all the rest of the language uses. Why add new words in when you've got perfectly good words right there that can follow the rules like everyone else? One particularly tricky thing with the accusative N is sometimes it will be used at the end of adverbs. If you're talking about where you're going, right, as in the right side of my body, is dextra. This is mia dextra flanco. So, if I wanted to say I am going right, then I am going dextren. It becomes an adverb because it's describing where I'm going. But it's also it's receiving the noun of going. Right is describing the way I'm going, but it's also receiving, the verb of go. So it is both an adverb and accusative in that case. That's the only time that'll happen, but it's a good thing to know, and you can show off to the more experienced users if you can remember that. And again, this really allows for the flexible use of word order. That's really good because, again, international language, and not all languages have the same word order. In English, it's subject, verb, object, but in other languages, it's totally different. In other languages, it's verb, subject, object. Throw I the ball. And this way I can say, I throw the ball, and someone else can say, throw I the ball, and we can both understand each other perfectly because of this sometimes confusing but really helpful little accusative, N. That is not used for indirect objects. If I throw the ball to you, you are not directly receiving the throwing action. You're not being thrown. I'm throwing it to you. You're getting it indirectly. So, I'll is the word for to. And if I throw the ball, I'll thee to you, then all thee has to be next to each other. They're two separate words, but they have to be together. It can be I throw the ball to you. It can be to you I throw the ball. It can be throw I to you the ball. But to you has to be next to each other in that order, no matter what order the rest of it's in, just so that we understand who the ball is being thrown to. Because otherwise, that could get pretty confusing. More confusing than I'm sure it already is. Next, we have verbs. All infinitive verbs end in the letter E, or in English, I. An infinitive is like to be, to do, to help. So, to be is esti. To love is ami. And once again, you can change the part of speech. So, we talked earlier about frato is brother. Frati is to brother, I guess? I mean, if you can mother someone, why can't you brother someone? So, you can technically turn any part of speech into any other part of speech by changing the ending. And another lovely thing about our verbs is they all follow the same rules. Those of you who've learned another language before might understand how crazy that is. They all follow the same rules. There is no such thing as an irregular verb. I don't know about you, but I love it. So, infinitives, to be, to love, to brother, are E at the end of them. They end in I. Then, past tense, I loved you, I loved him, is me amis, lean, him. I loved him is me amis, lean. I was is me estis. Is is past tense verbs. Present tense is as, as. So, I am, estas, you are, vi estas, he is, li estas, we are, ni estas. One is, oni estas, they are, ili estas. You don't have to conjugate it for the different persons depending on who's speaking. You just conjugate it for tense. And then you say who's doing the action to let people know. And similarly, I love, amas. You love, vi amas. Or, I love, mi amas. You love, vi amas. He loves, li amas. She loves, she amas. It loves, it amas. G amas. Os, os, is future tense. So, will be, estos. Will love, amos. Same basic thing. Then, we get into participles. You have two types of participles, active and passive. I'm going to describe those with the word eat. So an active participle is eating. So basically all active participles in English end with ing. A passive participle in English would be eaten. The eaten apple is far less frightening than the eating apple. Now, those, you will notice, eaten and eating, were both adjectives. They were describing the noun apple. So these will end in the letter A. This is the past tense active participle. You can tell it's past tense because you will remember is for past tense verbs, is for a past tense verb, and inta for a past tense active participle. The person I was loving is the person mi amintis. Is aminta is someone I was loving. You could also make this a noun and say aminto, or sorry, the person that was loving me. Someone who was loving is aminto. Amanto is present tense for that. Present tense active participle. Amanto would be lover. And Esperanto is the noun, the hoping one. Someone who, or one who is hoping. It's the noun form of hoping, which I think is a really cool name for a language. We're really hoping, against all hope sometimes, that Esperanto will do what it was made to do, will finally be allowed to be an international language, the international language. So, you have amanto, or more commonly you'll have words that end in anta. So that's present tense. Someone who is still loving. Someone who will be loving is, see if you can guess the pattern, amonta. So that, I think, is a little bit easier to do, the inta, anta, onta, because you've got the same pattern here. Past tense, is, int, inta. Present tense, as, anta. Future tense, os, onta. So, if it's whatever tense tense vowel and then nt, usually it'll be nta. If it's an adjective, then that would be somewhat like ing. Then we have our lovely passive participles. Remember, like eaten or beloved. Amita would be an adjective describing someone that I used to love. Amita. Because you see that I there, and you recognize it's past tense. Amata is someone that I currently love. Is describing someone that I currently love. Amato is the word beloved as a noun. Amata is beloved as an adjective. And amota is someone that you're definitely going to love someday. Maybe your future child is amota, is going to be loved. And that is most of our verbs. You also have, if you want to make it a command, you. Amu is love. Estu is be as a command. If you ever want to command someone to do pretty much anything, you're going to add you to the end of it. U. One place that's going to be interesting and sometimes tricky for English speakers is in the word bonvolu, which means please. Literally, it means good want, or want good things. Want good. So, if you're saying, please do this, really, you're saying you have to have the second one be E. Bonvolu ami. Please love that person. Please be there. Bonvolu esti. Because just like in English, if you've conjugated one verb and you've got two verbs in a row, the second one doesn't get conjugated. If I say, I want to do this, I want to be there, then the second one is going to be an infinitive. So, if you're saying, want to be there, like commanding someone to think good things about, to want good to be there, then the second one has to end with an I. That I'm just letting you know ahead of time, because that will save you a little bit of confusion in the long run. Another one that I sadly don't have an index card for, shame on me, is us, which is conditional, is what it's called. That's like the word would. Estus is would be. Amus is would love. It helped me when I was learning to think of it as sort of an if-then statement. Anytime you're using an if-then statement, if he would be there, then I would love that. Both of those would end in us. If he estus there, then I amus that. So that's going to be the us. It won't be used nearly as commonly as our three big ones, is, as, and os. Most verbs you see, if they're not ending with I, they will end with is, as, or os. Something that does come up sometimes, in English, we use ing as part of verbs a lot, like I am going. But if you're saying I am going, I am helping, in Esperanto, that's still going to be a present tense verb. If you say I am loving, then, like, I am loving such and such, then you don't have to say mi estas amanta this. You technically can, but you totally don't need to, and it's a load of trouble that you don't need to worry about. You can just say mi amas. I love, I am loving. I am loving this. Mi helpas, I help, I am helping. Mi faras, I do or make, I am doing, I am making. And that as is going to be I do this or I am doing this, just exactly equally. Is is I did this or I was doing this. It generally, you don't really need to make a distinction between them. Something else is ne. Ne is the word for no. You may have wondered at some point about, with all this flexible word order, how do you do that? The whole no thing. I don't want this. The answer is you put the ne directly in front of the word that it relates to. If you're saying I won't be there, mi ne estos there. Mi ne estos. If you say ne mi estos, then that's like saying, well, I won't be there. So it really depends on what it is you're trying to emphasize. If you're trying to say, I won't be, then you're saying ne mi estos. But if you're trying to say, oh yeah, I won't be there, then you want that ne to be by estos. You see? Because it's got to be by what it's directly relating to. Otherwise, with all the flexible word order, it gets confusing. Something else you might be wondering about is questions. You can always tell if a sentence is a yes or no question because of this little word, chu. In English, if you want something to be a question, like I am going versus am I going? In English, you mark that with word order. But we've already covered that in Esperanto, you can flip those words however you want them. So, in Esperanto, you put the word chu at the very beginning of the sentence. So, if I'm trying to say, let me find my little card again, that I am such and such. Yes, I am. Then you're asking, really? Are you? You would say, chu vi estas? And chu goes at the beginning of the sentence to mark that the whole sentence is going to be a question. That way you're letting people know right up front, like that upside down question mark that you see in Spanish. Chu vi estas? You let people know straight up front that this is going to be a question, specifically a yes or no question. For other questions, we actually have specific words like why or who. But yes or no questions, it would just be word order, so instead we have chu. You don't translate the word chu because in English we don't have a single word that makes it a question. But you can put chu just all by itself if you want. Like someone says, oh hey, I'm going such and such place. Then you can say chu or chu vere, truly. But if you're ever saying something that could be a statement as a question, then you always have to have the word chu in front of it. Chu ne? And that, in just about 50 minutes, is pretty much all of Esperanto grammar. That's it. And so, once again, since I do know that was a lot of information, there should be on the sidebar of our group subreddit, of our class subreddit, there will be a link to a document, Esperanto in 3 pages. All of what we have covered today will be on the first page of that, along with a little bit of extra stuff that you don't need to know just yet. So if you need to go back and have something to look at, if you're a more visual learner, or if you just need something to print off and circle, then you can definitely use that. We will also include, we will be linking on the subreddit, along with this video, a worksheet that you can fill out, and that will be the homework. If you could get that back by Friday, that would be fantastic, because that would give us time to grade it for you, and make sure if you have any questions, you can definitely ask us. We would love to answer your questions. Esperantists kind of like talking about our language. And I would be more than happy to answer any questions you have for me. You can send them to me in a private message, or if you'd rather, you can just comment on any of the links that we post, and we will gladly answer your questions for you and make sure that we can clear up anything that I might not have been terribly clear on. So, that is Lesson 1, Esperanto Grammar. Thank you all so very much for listening, and good luck on that worksheet. Have a wonderful week. See you next week, same time.